In this video, I want to talk about the project which hasn't been talked about yet, which is the part that's 15% of your grade, which is the analysis paper. So this is something that I've just kind of come up with, and I don't mean that in kind of a flippant way of just saying, just you know, threw this all together here. Um, but what I want to do here is just find a meaningful way where you can think about the data. And because the data is so important to an economist, this gives you a way to both know and see how you can access it. Not long after this course is done, how you can access the data and think about it. So I tried to write out the steps for you to do this project step by step. And I just want to talk about it. So I'm looking for about 5 to 7 pages, but that's including the graphs. So as you can see there, as you start to throw the graphs in there, um, the I don't think the page limit you're going to have to be writing an incredible amount. But what's useful about this is that you're doing this in 2 stages. You're going to be giving me a rough draft, and then I'm going to give you comments, and then 2 weeks later, the final draft is going to be due. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to this website, fred.stlouisfed.org. Now, you've seen me go to this site before in some of the lectures. And so here's our website right here. Then what I want you to do is basically open up another window, either as a Google Doc or in Microsoft Word, and you're basically going to create the outline of a paper that has 5 sections. The introduction, a section then that covers production in the economy in some way, another section that covers employment or unemployment in some way, and then another section that has prices or some notion of inflation in some kind of way. And then a final section, which is very important, which isn't a conclusion, but really a reflection on what the data is telling you or how you're going to use this data long after this course is done. And so, as I say here, then, in the introduction, what am I asking you to do? In about 1 to 2 paragraphs, I want you to talk about, give me a quick overview of what data points you used and what dates you looked at it for. Um, Even when you're getting the data from Fred, you're going to notice that they get the data from somewhere else. So tell me where that is. And then talk about the dates. When you open up the data, it's going to give you a kind of default date. That might not be the dates you're interested in. So then tell me what those dates are. I'm going to pause right. Okay. So the other thing to add to this then is that in the introduction, you're telling me which variables you actually used for these 3 things. So that's one thing I really want to emphasize in this video is there's kind of 2 approaches you yourself could do um, to kind of write this. You can do it very quick and dirty because you don't have a lot of time. And then in that case, you may just say for production, I'm going to use GDP, unemployment number, I'm going to use the unemployment rate, and inflation, I'm going to use the CPI. There's nothing wrong with that. It's technically correct. And even if I went into Fred and I just typed in inflation, you'll see that one of the things it gives you here is the consumer price index. But look at all the other things it gives you. These are all other ways that inflation can be measured. And that's what I want you to get looking at. You don't have to give me all these. Maybe you want to just pick one. Maybe you want to pick 1 or 2. Maybe you want to see how they compare to each other. That's fine. I just want you to be I want you to be an informed consumer of the data. So let's just say this, right? So let's say that I look at for prices. Let's say that I want to look at what does the market think that the inflation rate is going to average for the next 10 years. Okay, so right now the belief, right, is that, as you can see here, is that the market is expecting a 2.48% inflation rate over the next 10 years. So here you can see that over the next 10 years, the expectations of the inflation have been rising. such that earlier this year, the expectation was actually for a little bit higher of 2.56% inflation. But now, since the Federal Reserve has announced all these changes they're going to make, that's why it's now a little bit lower. But the idea is that you're going to say where the data is coming from. In this case, this is coming from the US Treasury Department based on this data. And you're going to tell me what is it measuring and why is it important. And you could look at other things like this as well. I mean, you might find something of interest. The other thing you can do here is that with this graph, you then can edit it. So click edit, and you can see that I can change things like I can change the time frame. I can change how it's measured. Um, any of those things. So I can change the time frame right here, but I can change what is it measuring. I can change that. I can also add a line. So if it's relevant, I can add another line and see how two variables are moving together. After that's all done, after I've got the graph that I really want, then I would select download. And probably the easiest way to do it is just to download it as an image. And then once you download it as an image in something like a Google Doc, you would go to insert image, upload from your computer, and then select that photo that you just had. And you'd put that in your paper and link it that way. And so you'll do that for the three areas: production, unemployment, and inflation. And then finally, in the last part, you're telling me, what does the data tell you? What is it either telling you about what the current situation looks like? What is it telling you about what the future looks like? What is it telling you, like, how will you use this data in the future? I'm looking for some kind of really introspective thoughts about what the data is telling you and what you're going to do with it. You're doing all this in the first state. You're giving me whatever you got. You don't have to have a final paper. Just give me whatever you've got by March 4th. I'm then going to look at it pretty quickly after that, give you comments, and then that second stage will be due March 14th. If you get the paper mostly done by March 4th and I give you those comments and then you respond thoughtfully to those, what you turn in on March 14th will probably be exactly what I was looking for, which is kind of what you're aiming for when you're talking about a grade. Then I just add some final things here, like a bibliography, page number, section headings, some things just to keep in mind. Okay. Again, I want to just say just the last thing again about the technical aspects. You don't want to just take a graph that, let's just say I actually do CPI. Just say you pick that, which is fine. The problem is this graph on its own, yeah, it tells you prices have been going up over time, but it really doesn't say very much about the more recent inflationary phenomenon. I would need to do two things. I need to shorten the time frame, and I really need to probably look at this in a different way other than index. So as you're going to see here, here's what I'm going to do. 2018. I'm going to pick January 1st of 2018 to now. And now I'm going to edit the graph. And I'm going to do percentage change from a year ago. And there. See, now I've changed the graph quite substantially so that I can say something about, wow, the pandemic has really changed things, right? I've both shortened the time frame and now I can tell a deeper story about what's going on. Or do I want to just look at the unemployment rate, right, which looks like this, right? Again, I don't want to 1950. Like, dude, that's like a long time ago. That I don't need data that old to be able to tell a thoughtful story. And do I really want to use the unemployment rate? Maybe I want to use something like U6, which is another measure of the unemployment rate, which is looking at more individuals, those who might even be working but are kind of marginally attached. And again, I'm going to change my years. And again, maybe I can. And so now if I stick with that same time frame, I'm telling a much deeper and kind of interconnected story about how the dates are matching, and I can tell that interconnected story for this. Now, so let's say I do that for all three of these, but now watch what I can do. I'm going to add a line. I'm going to add my CPI data. And now you can see that I can edit both lines. And so now for line 2, what I'm going to do is copy to all. And then again, I need to change the date here for the other data. And what do I need to do? Why does this look so bad? Oh, because it increased so substantially. Yeah, it just looks really messy. Sorry. Yeah, it's just unfortunate. Sorry, I just picked things that it's not going to work well, because the unemployment rate increased so substantially. It obviously over tripled in size, and prices obviously aren't tripling. So it doesn't look really clean here. But what I'm saying here, as you can just see what I did right here, dude. I mean, I just played around with the data. You're not going to get in any trouble on the paper if you just play around with the data. And I don't want to spend a ton of time here and waste your time by playing around with this on valuable time here, but see if you can get an interesting story out of this. Again, I'm running into some difficult stuff here because the unemployment rate did change so much. But you never know. Maybe can be the way to tell an interesting way of the story. And again, when I get that done, download. I would suggest the easiest way to do this would just be to save it as an image, the graph itself, and then carry over that image to here, to your paper. And then the other thing would be is take your suggested citation, copy that, and paste that over in your bibliography. Okay, I hope that helps everyone.